Hello and welcome to Not Every Single. I'm Joe.
And I'm Stephanie.
Today we're talking about a record that turns 20 years old, or I think already has turned 20 years old. But the box set is coming in like a week. It's Linkin Park's seminal sophomore effort, Meteora, produced by Don Gilmore, who also did Hybrid Theory. And you heard it for the first time yesterday.
I had never heard, I just had heard the singles.
So I imagine from Hybrid Theory, you had probably heard In the End quite a bit.
Yeah.
That was the big song, kind of inescapable throughout 2001. And then coming into this one, you had maybe heard Numb.
Numb, for sure, yeah.
Okay, that was kind of the big radio.
Yeah, I was very familiar with that one, for sure.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, I definitely heard. I think it was like on MTV and stuff a lot back when that was still like a pretty big deal.
Gotcha. Okay, that makes sense.
Yeah.
That was definitely more of an MTV2 video.
Yeah.
Yeah. I am very familiar with Meteora, but not for a long time. I had it when I was 13 in 2003 when it came out, but it's not a record that stayed with me throughout my life. Contrast that with, say, Gorillaz' Self-Titled from 2001. I got it that year. That record stayed with me. I've heard it all throughout my life since then. I know it like the back of my hand. Meteora was like dusting off this old thing where I'm like
Gorillaz, you like listen to it, you know, you've kept listening to it throughout your life. And this one is like just a little, okay. Yeah, you always have those records where you listen to it a few times and then never again.
Yeah, and I imagine, I think I listened to it quite a bit when I had it. And going back to listen to it now, I really recognized why. And it was because of a lot of interesting production techniques.
Yeah, I mean, you've always been into production. You've been producing music since when did you start producing music?
I don't know.
Pretty young.
The womb.
Yeah.
Had a Pro Tools rig in there.
Yeah. So I think that's something that you've always noticed more so. I mean, I think for me, it was more about like the singing and, was it fun and things like that?
Yeah. Thinking back to that time, I didn't have terminology for this stuff, but like in the Gorillaz record and like in Meteora and other things I had back then, like OK Computer and stuff, it was just like, whoa, that weird sound that like, I think it's only in my left ear. And, like, how do they do that? And like starting to become interested.
Right.
So it was kind of fun to go back and hear all those little things. And there was ones I specifically remember. I remember when that did that weird thing, But let's go to you. You just heard this thing for the first time. Overall thoughts?
Yeah, I mean, I think there's a reason why I never really delved into Linkin Park based off their singles. I don't have anything against them. And I have to say, I don't dislike this album.
Yeah.
I think my reactions to it are more, maybe cultural and social context than actual music. I listened to it once and it was kind of like we were talking about recently, I was kind of just hearing a lot of yelling and then it kind of, then I would get a little bit okay, geez, with the yelling. Yeah. And then I listened to it again today and it didn't bother me as much the second time.
Yeah, I think that's fair because, important to note, we're coming into this you're hearing it for the first time. Not your genre.
No. I've listened to Evanescence, which is tangentially related.
Yeah, kind of. There's a little bit of crossover there. Yeah. But yeah, generally not a kind of record you would throw on. Mm-mm. So I think that's a fair way to come about it.
Yeah. Yeah. And I find I do need a little bit of context, a little bit of, at least 2 or 3 times to really start picking things out in an album. So I've listened to it twice. I think my thoughts are still pretty surface level on the music of it. But I do think there's a lot going on. I think it's interesting for what it was at its time in a lot of ways. Mm-hmm. And do you want to say anything about production and stuff, or do you want to get into fan base stuff? Or
Sure, yeah, I'd love to talk about production. So Don Gilmore produced their first album, Hybrid Theory, which was the biggest selling I forget what the qualifier is, but it was certainly the biggest selling record of that year, and like some sort of record for a debut or whatever. This thing was massive. And so they bring him back on for Meteora, and I think he really guided them in the right way. It's sure it can maybe be seen as Hybrid Theory 2.0, but in my mind, no, it's an evolution. It's solidifying we're good at this thing. It comes off much more just confident and concise, I think.
Which is an interesting take on the sophomore album, because so many people say, you know, sophomore slump. And it's like, okay, what do we do with the second album? Do we do something different? We don't want to do the same things. Like, I think the best way to go about it is, yeah, to like just evolve what you're doing just slightly and explore what that means for you. And that really can start to lay out where you're going to go from there.
Yeah, there can start to be breadcrumbs toward a different path.
Right.
Why does it have to be immediately after your first album? I agree. And I think this thing has so much underneath the surface that I truly love. The screaming and stuff, you know, just like you, it's not exactly my thing. Some music that we love has screaming.
Right.
For example, is it Gilliband?
Gilliband. I'm not sure how you say it.
Previously known as Girl Band. That's one of my favorite records of all time. Their first album. That thing's full of screaming.
Yeah.
Smashing Pumpkins, Melancholy, stuff like that.
Yes.
That's
I love
full of
Karen
screaming.
O, and she's always yelling. And Poppy, we mentioned Poppy a lot, but like
Poppy's
the I
always
Disagree
screaming.
album, yeah.
But this, you know, I guess this type of screaming in this genre, which I will not call nu metal, I think they're better than that.
And there's a lot of like sort of rap singing too in here. Yeah.
But the stuff going on underneath that, it's like really holds my attention. There's substance here, some serious substance. There are a lot of layers, and sometimes it's a thing going on in the intro that you don't notice carried over into the second verse until you really listen close. A lot of that is due to Joe Hahn, is the kind of DJ member of the group.
Okay.
And I think the way he tackles that sort of aspect of
So is he like bringing in samples, or what's he doing?
yeah, pressing samples onto vinyl.
Wow.
And scratching it in, but running it through a lot of interesting effects. You know, you think of something like Limp Bizkit, DJ Lethal is usually just bringing this like standard scratching.
Just scratching. Yeah.
You know,
That's pretty boring. That's all you do.
yeah. You get bored during a gig. But I think someone like Joe Hahn really brings it a tastefulness to it.
Okay.
And is running it through effects, and he's sampling his own band. He's sampling vocal lines. He's sampling string sections and percussion things, these little like dee, 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 that'll like run throughout the song.
Very Johnny Greenwood of him.
Yeah. He's like remixing his own band.
Yeah.
Yeah, I really appreciated that aspect of this album. And it made me think, like, it's something we kind of do. We're not here to plug our own band, but it's something we kind of do in our own music sometimes. Where like, once you finish a song, okay, that version's done. Then you start to like dismantle it and almost remix it, and that becomes the final product.
Right, yeah.
So those were kind of the underlying things I appreciated about this album. And I'll come back to production once we get into vocal stuff.
Yeah, I mean, I honestly didn't connect, too much with the vocal delivery style, but like, I think there's interesting things about it, which I think ties in with the lyrics really inextricably.
Yeah.
This whole kind of idea of, the idea of like male rage is a very delicate idea. I mean, I don't think anyone's really wrong to have anger about certain things in their life. And the way we express it is something that we need to learn, all of us in our lives. And I think it's something that at this time, especially, young men didn't have really healthy ways to let out.
Yeah.
and didn't have really healthy ways to express their emotions. And so the sort of like duality of like anger and like almost like tenderness you get here is very indicative of, I just think that, what's his name?
Chester Bennington.
Yeah. I think he was really forward thinking in a lot of ways in allowing his fans, and it's not just boys that were fans, there was people of all kinds. And so everybody identified with this, but in particular, a band that, kids your age when it came out could be like, other people feel this way too. Other people are mad about things in their life. And especially at a younger age, you don't have control over your life. Like, what do you do with that feeling? And here's someone being like, I'm angry too. I'm sad. I'm lonely. I don't know what to do. I'm confused. And like being able to sing along with that, I think could be very cathartic. I think it could go another way too, but obviously the intention was to be like, I see you and you're not alone. Yeah,
that's such a good point. And I think it really solidified like the longevity of this band, the dedication of their fan base, and the close connection that Linkin Park has with their fan base. And, even though it's not a band that I then continued to follow throughout my life, I always knew of like them and their like, they had like something called the LPU, which is like the Linkin Park Underground, like this close fan thing, and fan summits and events and stuff. And yeah, bringing that vulnerability into a record that you can not only hear in the lyrics, but hear that pain in the vocal, I think is really important. And I think maybe that's why I separate them from the nu metal thing.
Right.
To me, in my mind, when I hear the words nu metal, the term nu metal, I think of this like different kind of aggression, this like Fred Durst, whoever the guy from Korn is, like this, like, I'm mad. And so therefore like, I'm going to come get you. Like, this like,
or just like this more focus on the aggression than like where it's coming from and what it means and how to deal with it. Yeah. I definitely noticed that like a lot of the lyrics were like almost even over simple on some of these songs, which again, is something that the younger people probably didn't have a lot in a male band.
Yeah.
You get a band like, Nirvana and Pearl Jam and all these other like sort of, the grunge bands that from a little earlier. Yeah, these bands also had the kind of emotion, but the way they were writing was more mature.
Yeah. Yeah.
And which I love. I love some of Nirvana's stuff. Never really listened to Pearl Jam. I can't really comment on that. But like when you're 12, you can't like sing along to that and be like, yes, this is how I feel.
Yeah.
You could feel the emotion of it, but not the words. And so here it's like, these are the words that I didn't know I was trying to get out.
That's a really good way to put it. It's like in keeping it a little more simple, it's then relatable to everybody.
Yeah.
But you can hear that there's nothing inauthentic going on.
Yeah. And it's not that like older people can't relate and enjoy the lyrics too. It's reaching out to an audience that was largely, I think, ignored.
I think what comes to mind is I think my favorite song on this re-listen was Easier to Run. Maybe it's because it was the one without screaming, but but there was certainly a lot of cool production aspects that I gravitated towards. And I think some of the most vulnerable lyrics, one that stood out to me is like, something's been taken from deep inside of me, something I kept locked away, no one can ever see. Like, yeah, you're not hearing that in some of those other nu metal acts. And I think that is really the reason that there's quite a separation there between like those bands and this band. They're saying something different. They're letting you in much more. And it's not a put on thing of like, we're going to rage Woodstock 99. Let's go set everything on fire. It's just this, this like introspective thing.
And they still continue to have a very devoted fan base, right?
Oh, yeah. I mean, I think Chester passed in 2017. And since then, there's been some Mike solo projects and big Hybrid Theory box set with like new, unreleased stuff. And now we're getting that with Meteora. So it's still a very active community.
Yeah, which just goes to show that it really meant something. People who are, more like our age that are still big fans of it. And then when there's hopefully, younger people still finding it too, that always just speaks to just something that they were doing that was like on another level, I guess. And even though like I don't think I'll become really a fan of this band, I super appreciate that where they fit in and why people find them.
That makes sense. You kind of see it in some other bands like MCR, these groups that young people continue to find and are then like, I am here because of this band.
Right.
Like this band saved me. And those are bands that I will never talk trash about.
Right.
It's like you just can't. And similar to MCR, I think that these are a group of like good people.
Right.
Haven't really ever heard a bad thing about them.
So we hope you guys are all cool.
Yeah, you guys better be cool.
Do we want to talk about Faint?
Oh, yeah. So, Faint, my theory is that I think Britney Spears' massive hit Toxic from the following year maybe wouldn't exist without Faint. I think you can basically overlay Toxic, you can overlay it over Faint.
Right.
And it's kind of all there.
Yeah.
You can put the chorus of Toxic right on top of the chorus of Faint, and it works. Maybe we'll cut to someone who's done the work for me right here.
Yeah, which just goes to show that like what they were doing was innovative production wise. And, a lot of people talk about Toxic being like the best pop song of all time. I pretty much agree with that.
Yeah.
And I think I've heard a whole podcast episode on like the production of that song and everything about it. And like, come on, acknowledge it. They were already on this track a year before.
Those strings.
Yeah.
It's all right there. That leads me to the vocal thing I was going to get back to in the production, because you really hear it in the chorus of Faint. These choruses would not hit the same if Chester had to deliver it all at once, which obviously he has to do live. So I imagine that sounds like that. But in the studio, Don Gilmore made the very, very smart decision to take it line by line and let each line sort of like go into the background as the other one comes in. So take Faint, for example, like I can't feel, and then feel kind of like goes going to the left or whatever. I went this way, left or whatever. And then now you're getting the other line, and it adds this like fullness and this like anthem-like sound as opposed to a mouthful.
Yeah, which can sound, it can be cool sometimes, but like, maybe like in a fast, like pop punk song or whatever. But yeah, something like this, I love when people think a little bit about how vocals are being recorded, how they're being delivered, how they're being produced,
how they're being manipulated and glitched out.
Yeah.
That's something that's really cool. There's parts, it's happening to Mike's vocal a lot. I notice where it's like stuttering. And I think that goes back to Hybrid Theory. I think I remember like in the end having like
Okay,
But then even Chester's vocal, something like Breaking the Habit, I forgot about all those little parts where like maybe his voice sort of like starts to distort and glitch out in time with the percussion, all these little details that make it a pretty immersive listening experience.
Right. And the interesting thing is that don't really feel dated, those techniques.
No.
Which is like bizarre, because usually any little thing like that, you come back 10, 20 years later and you're like, that was so of its time. And it sounds so dated now, but like it's like stuff that people still do.
That's a good point. It's like I'm thinking about this album as I heard it today. Does it even sound dated, or does it sound like it could have come out yesterday? You know?
Yeah.
I'm sure that just in the style of music and the rap and the rock on top of each other as a whole, sure, you can relate that to a certain time. But this thing still sounds pretty fresh.
Production wise, it holds up for sure.
Yeah. So I guess we'll start to wrap it up.
Yeah. I think I've said what I want to say.
Favorite track?
I think Faint.
Faint's
I just like
killer.
it. Yeah, I like the strings. It sounds like Toxic. It sounds kind of like a cool pop song with that singing on it.
He goes full screamy towards the end there.
Yeah.
Now here's what I'm curious about. Live, could he go that big guttural scream and come right back into that chorus on key? That's what I want to know. Let's check the video evidence. I'll cut to it here. And let's not forget to acknowledge his ability to like yell or scream in key.
Yeah, that's a whole thing that people can learn how to do. Some
impressive.
People can do it naturally. Yeah. A little tiny aside, I was in my vocal lessons recently, and my coach was saying that there's like a lady who used to be an opera singer, and she's now like the screamo grandma, and she teaches like every screamo person to do that without hurting their voice, because you could trash your voice. Also, you can trash your voice like that. So the fact that he can do it and not and not be utterly destroyed.
This record definitely sounded like a tour de force of the throat. It was certainly impressive. Some of the harmonies going on in I forget the one. One has these like amazing harmonies. I think it's easier to run as well. If I could change, I would.
Yeah.
These really cool harmonies going on vocally. Pretty incredible album. So here's what I want to hear from you guys. What's your favorite track from Meteora? Looking back 20 years on, what does this record mean to you? And are we missing out on anything? Like I said, I didn't go forward with this band. I didn't continue the journey. I went a different route with my music throughout high school and beyond. I'm older than that.
You're out of high school? Oh my gosh.
33 years young. Should we go back and revisit anything? I understand that it wasn't a trilogy of this sound. They evolved past that after Meteora. Is there something we should check out? You know, if I became the Radiohead kid after this, like, is there something that I can maybe jump back in on and maybe you'd like to hear us talk about? Let us know. So that'll do it.
I think that'll do it. Thanks for watching.
Yeah, thanks for watching, and to Linkin Park fans everywhere, thanks for checking us out and having us hear this record.
Yeah.
We'll see you next time. This is Not Every Single. I'm Joe.
And I'm Stephanie.
Bye.